Well, welcome students. My name is Lindsay Walsh. I serve as the Assistant Director of Vantage Point at Mary Baldwin University. And we are very fortunate to have several Mary Baldwin and Teach for America alumni with us today. So we're going to talk a little bit about their experience and the kind of things that you can expect when you join TFA. And we also have a great recruiter joining us to give some information. I'm going to let these wonderful folks introduce themselves, and then we'll launch into the program.
I'm Shaterica Parks. I am the Director of Recruitment and Retention for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And my alum year, I graduated from Mary Baldwin in 2010, and I was also a 2010 core member for Teach for America.
I'm Holly Smart. I am currently a fourth grade reading teacher at Legends Public Charter School in Prince George's County, Maryland. I graduated from Mary Baldwin in 2014, and I am a TFA DC 16 core member.
And my name is Meg Burkle-Hunn. I graduated from Mary Baldwin way back in 1996, and I was a Teach for America core member in Eastern North Carolina in 1997. Yeah.
Yes, and my name is Destiny Bingham, and I'm the Teach for America recruiter here for Mary Baldwin, and I will be the one that will help you through the process and help you really understand if this is the right fit for you.
Great. Well, welcome to all of our wonderful panelists today. And I'm going to kick it off by asking you guys to tell us a little more about yourself. So what did you study at Mary Baldwin? You all shared your graduation date. And where were you placed for your Teach for America experience? And then tell us too, because I don't have a ton of background, do you guys get to have any selection or preference when you're selecting where you're placed for Teach for America? So Mary Baldwin major, and then your TFA placement and a little background there.
So I can get started sharing that. I graduated, like I said, in 2014. I was a double major in political science and religion. I then worked in the DC region as a literacy tutor. And when I actually applied to Teach for America and when I graduated from Mary Baldwin, made it to the final round and did not get accepted to teach, and then found out about another experience where I was a literacy tutor in DC for 2 years and decided to reapply to Teach for America. Since I was already kind of in the DC region when you pick your selections, so I think it might have changed, but when you got to pick 10 regions you would be interested in teaching in. And if there was a reason that you needed to be in a specific region, you could state that. My then boyfriend, now husband, was in grad school in DC. And so I put that as a reason, my partner is here. I would like to kind of stay in this area, and was picked to teach in Prince George's County in the DMV. Yeah, I think that was all of the questions.
I can go next. I was a psychology major at Mary Baldwin. I kind of floundered around and switched my major a whole bunch of times and finally figured out how I could graduate on time with psychology and felt like I really wanted to give back in some way. And I also spent a year out of college before applying to Teach for America. I did some youth ministry work in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then was still like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I've always been interested in teaching. And so I applied to Teach for America. And this is ancient history, but then you could rank on a piece of paper where you thought you might want to go. And North Carolina was not my first choice, but it was one of the choices because I was familiar with North Carolina. I taught high school students in Lewisburg, North Carolina, students with disabilities. And was there something else that you that was all 8 questions, right?
Yeah, that was perfect.
I think I covered them.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, for me, my major was healthcare administration and economics. I wanted to be an investment banker, but we all know the market crashed in 2010. So instead of being an investment banker, I thought that I would spend 2 years giving back to my community. And I learned that Teach for America had actually placed at my high school, which was a very high need school at the time. And so since I had already had that connection, I wanted to give back since other people who weren't from my community felt strongly enough to give back. So I signed up to join the Corps, and of course, I taught in Charlotte. And I taught seventh grade math in the city. And then I eventually, after my TFA commitment, I actually went to my middle school that I attended to teach math as well. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I will also just give a little bit of color to the regional placement. Right now, it is the 10. Like Holly talked about, you can rank from 1 to 10. The top 10 of our 51 different regions throughout the United States that we place in. If you apply as a third year, right now our application is open for juniors, you're pretty likely to get your top pick. About 80% of our folks that apply in their junior year for the early decision get their top pick. And then as you go into your senior year, the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get top preference. Some regions fill up faster than others, New York, LA, DC. So if you're wanting a sexy region, you definitely want to apply early.
All right, well, all the geography talk segues nicely into our next question, which it sounds like you guys had some idea about where you wanted to be placed, but tell us a little more what you learned about the geographical area or the specific location where you were teaching through your experience. What was something that surprised you or something that you learned about that area?
And so I guess I'll start on this one. I actually taught where I was born and raised and went to school. But what really surprised me was what I felt was the lack of change from when I was actually a student to when I was a teacher, in multiple facets, including like access to tools, experience of the teachers, just different types of things, diversity in the classroom, diversity in the teaching staff. It was very similar to my experience in my own middle school education. So it was just really, I would say, a little disappointing and perplexing to see that those things had continued to exist. And I went to college and kind of thought that everything was roses and was going to be better. So that would be mine.
When we started in DC, so like the first day of Summer Institute, they start talking to you about DC's history, the history of Prince George's County. When I started teaching in Prince George's County, I think that we were 20 Corps members were in the county, and everyone else, like the DMV region is the DC region Corps is smaller, but there were only 20 of us in Prince George's County. So a lot of our history focused on DC, but we talked about the gentrification of DC and how DC, what's known as the chocolate city, but when you look at it and when you look at its teachers, that's not necessarily what's represented. And I was so blown away with how like candid the conversation was and how we really dived into the history of the region. I had a little bit of an advantage of having already worked there for 2 years and having been in the school system. But I had friends who were born and raised, lost my headphones, sorry, who were born and raised in DC and were teaching there. And so to be able to also hear their experience, but then to go to Institute and realize that my Institute was in Philly, that not everybody got that history of their region the way that we did. Like our regional staff was very intentional about making sure that we understood what we were going into and we understood the history and the complexity of DC, and that we were not there to solve problems. Like we were not going in to fix it. And I think I loved that aspect of my my core member experience, because it really helped shaped me going into the classroom and understanding all the complexities. And I've taught in Prince George's County for 5 years, and there are still things that I'm learning about the history of Prince George's County and the complexity of our Board of Education and the history of our county, and what's in our schools. So that was really kind of, I loved that part of my core member experience, but was also kind of surprising to know that not everybody got as in depth of a history as I did.
And for me, it sounds like things things have really changed. We when I was in Teach for America, everybody did the Summer Institute in Houston all together, and there were only 500 of us total. And so we shot up to North Carolina, and we didn't get a lot of the history there, and I was surprised and shocked just to learn the racial divide in the town I was living in. You literally went by a Confederate statue, and it was a white side of town and a black side of town. And Lewisburg was still close enough to the capital of North Carolina that it was sort of becoming a place where people would move to and commute in, but not quite. But my friends who were part of the core, who were further afield in some of the other counties, they had huge disparities in poverty amounts, and it was just shocking to me to learn how underfunded the schools were, compared to my own experience, but then also where I was teaching compared to some of the other counties that were further, more rural, and further afield. One of my friends was only allowed one ream of copier paper for the whole semester, and they didn't have books, and so it was an eye-opening experience for me.
Wow. Well, it sounds like that Teach for America obviously has kind of updated, as I'm sure they do periodically, their curriculum and training to make sure you know what you're stepping into. And let me know if I've got this wrong, Destiny, but I would assume you guys are probably working with schools that are either underfunded or understaffed, or might have a hard time retaining staff. Like, what kind of schools does Teach for America typically work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. All of our schools are Title I schools, so schools that are low-income schools. And both of those things are typically true, that schools that have a hard time retaining teachers for various reasons and attracting teachers to the region. We also have like a few high needs regions where like it is the very real reality that if a Teach for America core member doesn't go there, then maybe the gym teacher will be teaching math that year. And we have a couple areas where it's just impossible to get teachers there. There are other areas where our Teach for America core members are interviewing against other very qualified applicants as well. And so each of our regions really functions as its own TFA now. So I love hearing the experiences of like folks who have done this on varying scales, because we know that each community has its own needs. And like the Teach for America core members that are in New York City, teaching kids there, and the Teach for America core members that are teaching on reservations in Nebraska have very different needs. And so each region really functions as its own TFA, working with those communities that we're serving there. And so it's really hard to like make broad strokes because of that. But those are some of the things that are always consistent. They are always low income schools. They're always going to be Title I schools. But some of those needs change.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. So as we can imagine, you know, like students in the Bronx might vary in needs versus the ones in Nebraska, like you talked about. But tell us too, because I mean, every experience and I think all work can have its challenges, but tell us about a rewarding experience that you had with Teach for America. So maybe this was a breakthrough with a student, or like a really great connection with a parent, or just your peers, and some clarification on what might lie ahead for you. Just a rewarding experience that you had during your time in Teach for America.
I can start there. So I was in a little bit of a unique situation where my year, 5 of my core members got hired at the same elementary school. And so we were my like little teacher crew, and we were there. The one of my best friends who we got breakfast together at 5:30 every day at Institute, and we spent those long days of Institute. We didn't teach at the same school over the summer at Institute, but then we'd get up, we'd eat breakfast, we'd walk to our school bus together, we would come home, we would go to 1300, which is a dorm at Temple University where we were living. We would get to Temple and we would sit down and we would grab dinner really early, and we would plan together, and then we would, on the weekends, we would hang out. And then I got to my school. She had already been hired by our school. And then I was like, I'm going to be teaching at your school. Like, this is exciting. Like, we're going to be together. And now 5 years later, we taught, and I don't think I said this to begin with, I was placed 5th grade elementary reading and social studies. And she was a 1st grade teacher. We taught at our placement school for 4 years together. This year we left our placement school. There were 3 of us left from our first year. And her and I, like, we still talk to this day, and like she is like part of my teacher crew, and like that relationship that I built at Institute, like she has seen me cry. She has come to stepped out of her classroom when she heard me, like she's heard moments where like, Mrs. Smart, like, do you need some help? Like, do you need me to watch your class? Like, and the relationships that I made with people in my core are just like, they still carry me today, like through teaching. There's still people that I keep up with. And I think for me, that was the most rewarding experience, because until you're a teacher, like, you don't know what teachers go through on a daily basis and what they are doing. And until you're in that experience, no one else in my family is a teacher. So texting my siblings or texting my mom about what has happened during a day, like, they don't understand it. They're like, okay, like trying to talk through with them. But to have that person that I've had throughout my entire core, it was one of the best pieces for me. And she's still someone that I have those hard conversations with that we had when we were core members, that even now to this day we still talk about. And I think, and it was just an awesome experience to kind of have that friendship and to be able to take that away. On top of, like, I mean, yeah, I totally have stories about, I had a kid who hated reading, and then he found a book in my class, and it was just like a small, like, beginner chapter book, and he started reading those, and then he was like hiding it. We were reading Maniac McGee, but he has his book hidden inside of his copy, right? Like, I definitely have those stories, but one of like the best parts were the relationships that I made with other teachers that were professional, that are now like personal relationships that have really kind of carried me through.
I would say I also forged some of my. Oh, sorry. You
go ahead. No, you guys are on the same wavelength.
I was going to say that I also forged some of my closest friendships in Teach for America and Mary Baldwin. Those are the people I still keep up with. I can still talk to them about anything, and they'll drop everything to come to me. But I think the story that I want to share with you all is the story of Cathy. She was one of my students who was really struggling. She, like Destiny said, a lot of the students, especially they called it Exceptional Children's Program at the time, which meant special education. They didn't have permanent teachers, and if they did have a real teacher, that person often didn't stay very long. And so they were constantly getting shuffled and getting the leftovers. And I think Cathy suffered from, well, all the students suffered from that, but she came into my classroom with an extreme dislike for school, but she had to be there because she wasn't old enough to drop out yet, which was what she was hoping to do. And in my classroom, she acted out and really struggled in a lot of ways. And I had a lot of difficulty with her. And eventually we ended up suggesting that she get tested again. And she was tested, and she was placed then into a life skills program where she got really mad and ended up being expelled from school. So this is that's the hard part of the story. And then so I did my 2-year commitment with Teach for America was with a cross-categorical classroom, which meant that I taught people with learning disabilities, with dyslexia, with at the time it was called mild mental retardation, all in the same classroom, all different subjects. And then I decided to stay on a 3rd year and teach the life skills class. And all of a sudden there was Cathy again. And you know, in my heart of heart, I was like, oh no, this is going to be terrible, because we had really gone at each other. And then, but then I thought, you know, Cathy, she's got a lot going for her. And so I asked her, I sort of made her, I gave her some leadership roles in the classroom, and she began to shine. Gosh, I feel so old telling you these stories, but we got a classroom computer from Coca-Cola. It was a desktop computer. It was a big deal, you know, one computer. And so we decided to do a classroom newsletter, and I asked Cathy to write the classroom newsletter, and she took to that, and she was just so helpful, and it was a huge transformation. And I think it was because she was given the opportunity to lead in a classroom setting, and so that was that's the story that I wanted to share. It was a powerful experience for me, one of dread and fear, and and then bridging into joy and happiness. So, thank you.
Well, it looks like I'm next. So for me, I have a few, but I think like the one that's most poignant to me is from my first year in the classroom. I had a student who was an immigrant from the Congo. He was having like a really tough time, and we just forged a really, really close relationship. And you know, I paid for him to like go to summer camp and just do other things that I knew he wouldn't be afforded the opportunity to do because he knew he wanted to serve in the American military. So I was just like, well, if you already know what your future is at 12, like I guess I could assist you in getting there. And so I'm just super proud of him. He ended up with the full track scholarship at Appalachian State University. We still keep in touch, and he is in the process of trying to prepare for OCS school so that he can be an officer in the Army. So that's definitely one of my favorites, Glotty. And then, I mean, I just have so many others, but just like the other ladies, my lifetime friends have been from Teach for America and Mary Baldwin. So that's literally like my core group of friends from those experiences. But just in general, like I keep a page for my students to like share their updates, or like they'll text me or message me on Facebook. I have been out of the classroom for a while. So just like seeing their updates and like how they're doing with life. And even sometimes when they like bring up things that I may have said or did to inspire them to make better life choices. So that's really kind of the highlight for me. But I actually was able to inspire a lot of students using the TFA model. I think it was transformative decision making, where you were on a scale from where you were making decisions that would negatively impact your life to making decisions that were on track for you to do your future goals. And we used that a lot in the classroom. And I was really shocked to see like how many of my students still think about that today, before they react or they have a big challenge. So there are lots of small wins, that, yeah, I really appreciate it.
Well, it sounds like we have a resilient group of instructors here. So you've already shared a little bit with your challenges that kind of turned into successes. But tell us about some of the challenges you had during Teach for America. And you've talked about the transformational model, but what were some tools that you had, or just some personal self-care or skills that really helped you to persist and overcome those challenges as they arose?
So I guess I can start by saying my MTLD and just having a regional office close by in general made things so much easier. TFA did a wonderful job of like having resources for us. So whether it was tests or quizzes that we could use, like we would do the walkthrough of like our content standards. And I remember like even for my institute, I had to take the 7th grade North Carolina math EOG because that's what I was teaching. So it was a lot of those instructional things that really, really helped me actually shine in the classroom. But of course, it helped my students accomplish their big goals as well. So for me, I would say that was probably the absolute best, just having that support and like having professional learning teams or communities that were in your content areas to sit and share tips and talk about what was working best for your students. And then you had the office as well as your MTLD. Mine taught me classroom management, which I did not have when I went into the classroom. So yes, they provide plenty of resources to make sure that you survive. And I also like that they help you with career planning early on, so that you can kind of determine what you want your career to be. So TFA was kind of like my postgraduate mentor.
Yeah, so I definitely have to agree. Like going in, like I had no, like I had been in a school for 2 years, but I was working one-on-one with students. I had no like educational training outside of what I was given, like at Institute. And both from because there were 5 of us at our school, we got a little bit of extra help. Like we had someone from TFA at our school building like at least once a week, if not more. Prince George's County also gives new teachers a mentor. And so even though I had my MTLD, I also had a mentor from Prince George's County. And then Prince George's County does this awesome thing called collaborative planning, where you meet, well, it depends on your school, we met twice a week. But when you're the only person in your grade level that teaches it, it was me, and he was the reading our reading instructional lead teacher, and then he became our assistant principal, and now he's a principal of his own school. So for my first 2 years, I met with him twice a week, one-on-one, and that kind of one-on-one support that came from TFA and from my school, like even though it was my first year. I mean, you have struggles as a first-year teacher, whether you've been in a true teacher program or an alternative teacher program. But like that support really helped me become the teacher that I am today. There was always someone in my classroom, it felt like. And as a first-year teacher, that can be really intimidating. And that was probably the biggest thing I had to overcome, was they're there to help me, right? Unless it was my principal who said like, this is your formal observation, like they were not there to judge me. They were not there to, it wasn't going against like on my evaluation or anything. They were truly in that room to help me. And that was a really big thing. And so becoming, and I know Teach for America is really big on this, like being a reflective practitioner and really thinking like, what am I doing in the classroom? I taught my lessons twice. Now I teach the same lesson 4 times a day at my new school. Okay, what did I do in the morning that didn't work or that I need to change? And my first year, I was not there. And I was so glad that, Teach for America really pushed us to kind of be reflective in our practices. What did work? What didn't work? Was this, culturally responsive for your classroom? I taught at a school that was heavily Black and brown, a lot of immigrant students, right? Was I taking into account my English language learners? Like, did my vocabulary words have pictures with them? Did I have the Spanish word for all of our classroom tools next to it? And so there are just so many things that come at you as a first year teacher, but like those supports that TFA gave in our school, my school and county, like really helped and shaped me into the teacher that I am today.
Yeah, the challenges that I face were along the lines of classroom management as well, and also being in that cross-categorical classroom, also teaching not only a wide range of ability level, but also a wide range of subject matter at the same time. I think one math class, I had 3 different levels of math in, and so I had them facing different directions, and I'd spend some time with this one, some time with this one, and just that kind of stuff was it was overwhelming in a lot of ways. And so I really did reach out to and commiserate in some ways with a lot of my friends who were fellow Teach for America folks. There are a couple that taught high school students that I could really lean on, and then my housemate taught pre-K, and so it was fun to sort of compare and our stories and hear her stories. But the real thing that helped me, I think, through the 3 years that I did do Teach for America is the community that I lived in. I found I participated in the extracurricular activities. I coached tennis, and then I went to the football games, and so I showed up. But I also was living in a separate little town, and I found a little church there that I could go to every Sunday. And those people did not teach, but they loved on me, especially as a young person. They were like, "Whoa, young person!" And it was just a respite and a place where I could be me. And then I also found in that same area a state park where I would go. I think every Sunday I would go and just sit by the water and just breathe before I got back into preparation. So I think it's important to remember that you're not just a teacher, that you're also a human being, and to really care for what you need as a person, because there are a lot of challenges in teaching, no matter how you if you're a Teach for America teacher or another teacher.
Well, you are sages here in this group, because I heard a couple different things through your different strategies to make sure that you persisted. So I feel like from Shaterica, I heard that reaching out when you needed help and like knowing what resources were there was really important. And then from Holly, just hearing that you do need to set aside time for reflection / it just makes your instruction that much better. But then also finding the balance, right? Like Meg was talking about, taking care of your physical self and your spiritual self, because all of you is coming into the classroom, right? Well, Destiny too, I'm going to throw a question your way, because I've heard Institute brought up several times, and NTOD or NTDO. So can you clarify what kind of training Teach for America provides at the beginning to help prepare you for the classroom, and then what kind of supports the teachers have throughout their experience?
Yes. First, training should come with just like a dictionary of TFA jargon. And so Institute is the 6-week training that happens before you teach And that is, you're teaching summer school. We're teaching you pedagogy, classroom management skills, lesson planning. You do a lot of like short cycle iteration. So you'll teach for an hour and then you'll switch because you'll be with a cohort of folks. And so they'll support you through that. A huge part of our institute is actually DEI training, anti-racism training, anti-bias training, and just understanding the different identity markers that we hold and the intersectionality of those and how those show up when we're leading the classroom. And so I know someone else talked about an MTLD, that is a Manager of Teacher Leadership Development. We are a leadership development organization. And so our goal is to really take leaders. Our bar is leadership. To get into TFA, you have to be a leader. And our bar is to take that leadership, and your coach really transforms you and learn how to be a systems change leader. And that is our model. And we do that throughout Institute and your 2 years. It's ongoing training and it's that ongoing support that all these folks talked about. Some ways that can look like tangibly is maybe your MTLD comes to your class and you're teaching a lesson and they're making tick marks on your classroom seating chart. And then after your lesson, they're saying something like, okay, Holly, I noticed that you called on more boys than girls during this math lesson. What do you feel like that's saying? Or I noticed you told the Black girls to be quiet and the white girls were talking just as much. Do you feel like there's a bias there? And just recognizing and bringing to the surface all of these biases that we hold that we may or may not have consciously encountered before. And that is a lot of what our training is, our focus is, and how we like holistically train our leaders to take their leadership and really impact the systems level, because we know that, yes, we're in a teacher shortage. Yes, all of these things are true, but these kids could have the best teachers in the world and they would still go home to food deserts, lack of access to healthcare, criminal justice systems that target them. And so we're really hoping to train this generation of leaders to lead in and out of the classroom for that systems level change.
Wow, I just learned a lot. And I feel like all of our teachers need Teach for America, right? Just saying. All right, so tell us, because it sounds like, I don't know if I got the abbreviation right, you had MTLDs that help you just kind of understand what some of your strengths were or what some of your challenges might lie ahead. So how did having that coaching and the Teach for America experience shape what you chose to do after Teach for America? And then if you can just remind us what you did right after TFA and what you're doing now, that would be great.
So I'm still in the classroom. I honestly, I think about this on a regular basis, I had a really hard time at Institute. And my first year of teaching was not easy. And so the fact that I'm still in the classroom honestly kind of shocks me sometimes, because I didn't know if I would make it. And those supports that I had really helped me. And like, thankfully, like there were still people in Teach for America that even as I like went through, that would have those like difficult conversations with me as I learned about being in the classroom and like what my role was there. And so last year was actually going to be my last year in the classroom. I graduated with my master's in library science. I was hoping to transition into library space throughout my time in as a literacy tutor and in the classroom. I realized that for me, access to information is really important, and not only for students, but also I encountered so many parents because of the systems that are in place that struggled with how to access the information that they needed. And I saw libraries as a place to do that. Then this whole global pandemic happened and libraries were not hiring. And so after I graduated, I was like, being a school librarian was not what I had wanted to do, but I was like, it's an environment that I am familiar with. So I applied. I kept seeing this listing in the Prince George's County Public Schools like job listing for a charter school needed a librarian, and so I applied for it, and I was like, I'm just going to email the principal just to see. And so the principal forwarded my email to the CEO of our charter school, and they're like, it's a brand new charter school, and our focus is on bridging the generational wealth gap. And so all of our students, currently we are K through 5, next year will be K through 6, they get financial literacy starting in kindergarten, and they have the opportunity to open up a stock investment portfolio in the, like, as a custodial account, but when they turn 18 will become theirs. So they are graduating high school with wealth. It's like such a cool concept. And the CEO says, we're not hiring a librarian because we're not going to be in person, and like as a first year school, that doesn't make sense as a decision for us. But we have this 4th grade reading teacher position opening. Would you be interested in applying for it? I was like, sure. We had an interview. Before the interview was over, I was offered the job, and it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made. It really, being at Legends has really kind of ignited and reignited my love for teaching. I'm working in a completely different community than I have worked with before, and so it has a whole new host of challenges, but it is, I was talking to one of my parents the other day, and I said, Legends is going to have to get rid of me right before I decide to leave. I just feel like it's such a continuation of my work that I did with Teach for America. We talk about those generational systems that are holding back our students. And so to work with a school that is committed to ending the generational wealth gap, and providing our students with that financial literacy that I'm learning things that I wish that I would have learned. It's just such an awesome continuation of like what I was doing with Teach for America and what I did in my classroom those 2 years after. And yeah, so it looks like I'll be in the classroom for a while, is what I'm predicting.
All right. Well, I guess.
Okay. This time you go first.
Okay. Well, for me, I, of course, started in the classroom. I had no intention of actually leaving the classroom. My goal was to teach for 5 years and become a math facilitator, just because I wanted to take out the fear in math and like make teachers and students realize it wasn't scary. And of course, college is what kind of changed my life trajectory. And I knew the correlation between middle school math and college completion rates. So that was really kind of my driving factor in what I thought was my career path. But there was one day that I had a friend who was an alum come and visit me at my school, and he was just like, I have this really great opportunity for you. Like, you're so passionate about quality teachers, like you lead your team. Like, why don't you recruit teachers? And I'm like, what is that? And he was just like, you would literally travel the country and tell people about this awesome charter school network, and get them to become a part of our charter network, and with the focus on diversity. So it was really exciting. And pretty much at the end of the school year, I packed my bags and moved to Denver, Colorado, to work with a charter school network to recruit high quality teachers. And from there, I've pretty much been doing the same thing. So I moved from a 12 school charter back to CMS, which has 181 schools, 182 now, I believe. And now I am at Winston-Salem, where I'm the director of recruitment and retention for about 83 schools. So I get to oversee all aspects of recruiting, both certified teaching classroom positions as well as operations. So from bus drivers to cafeteria employees to superintendents, I kind of do it all now in terms of hiring, and I absolutely love it.
Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you.
so honored to be on the panel with you too. I left, I did the 2 years and I decided I want to do one more year. And then I worked for a year after my Teach for America commitment with at a psychiatric hospital for children as an activities coordinator. And through that experience and Teach for America, I felt like my eyes were like blinded. I mean, like open to so much that I was just not aware of before I was however old I was, 22 or 23. And then I went to seminary. And so I am now a priest in the Episcopal Church. I went to seminary in New York City. And I think probably my Teach for America experience and that time at the hospital really it affected my heart, obviously, and I thought that one of the better ways for me personally to make a difference in this world along the lines of justice was to serve as a priest. And so that's what I've been doing the last 16 years now. I've worked in Philadelphia and in North Carolina. And so my Teach for America experience has stayed in my heart. It honestly is probably the most challenging work that I ever did, and also the most rewarding. The most rewarding in so many ways. It shaped and formed me, and it helped me to see that I could stand in front of a classroom, I could speak publicly, I could do so many things that before that I had no idea I could do. And so I use a lot of the skills that I gained from Teach for America in my current iteration of of who I am. And I was not given a lot of the opportunities that the two of you had because Teach for America was still so young then. We didn't do diversity, equity, inclusion training at all, you know. And so it's so, but I find it so it's so influenced me and in my life. I'm just grateful for that time and the challenges that came along with it.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing either your alumni experience or Destiny for telling us a little bit about what the training is these days. But we're coming to the close of the hour and I want to respect your time. But our program is called Let's Do Lunch. So tell us about one of your favorite places to get lunch and what you order. Or if you happen to be a home chef, what is a lunch that you enjoy making for yourself?
I can go first this time. Because of the pandemic, we just moved to New Mexico 3 years ago, and the pandemic has, kept us at home. And in the course of the pandemic, we also have committed to living with 15 chickens, and so we have a lot of eggs. So for lunch, usually I do some saute some kale and put some scrambled eggs in there and some cheese and make a nice little kind of omelet kind of thing. And that's a good go-to lunch for me.
So during I have like lunch in two phases now because I've had like teacher lunch, like being like in the classroom, like pre-pandemic. And so I would usually take something to like heat up, whether it was like leftovers or maybe like a microwave meal. The Trader Joe's tikka masala was one of my favorite go-to heat up lunches. And then during the pandemic, I was like at home. So I would make like a sandwich, and actually I would use my lunchtime as like time to work out. And then I would make lunch after that, like a quick lunch, grab like a cucumber, some ranch. And now we're going this week. For the first time, I'm going to have students in front of me in over a year. And that means our communal spaces are not usable. Like we don't want to be using microwaves and then having to clean that down and just So now I'm going for like a snunch type thing. So like a snacky lunch with like a cucumber, some fruit, some like lunch meat. Maybe it's a sandwich, like maybe it's not. Um, just depends. But we also had a tradition during our like pre-service week where we would, it started with our like core 5 of TFA members. We would always like either order pizza or like go out and get Taco Bell because there was one near our school, or like Bojangles. We would go and get fast food one day and like sit down and eat lunch together as we were like setting up our classrooms. And so like, yeah, but there are also two types of teachers. There are those that eat lunch, and there are those that go all day on like 1 cup of coffee and like don't eat lunch at all, like might have an apple, and I do not fall into that range. Like I need lunch.
So I guess that leaves me. And I mean, it's been over a decade, and I am still as unprepared when it comes to food as I was when I was 21. So as a teacher, I ate with the kids. Like they didn't like their school lunches, and I just be like, "Are you sure? Well, I'll give you the $1.50 that it costs." So some of my favorite school lunches were ham and macaroni and cheese and mozzarella sticks. So those are my two faves. And then if they didn't have those, I would just do like the school's like chef salad, which was awesome, with ranch dressing. So yeah, I basically lived off of school cafeteria food, as a teacher. And yeah, like I would even eat like the little dry cereal packets for breakfast because I was like making copies and doing other important stuff. And now, if I do get lunch, I have a really great team, who supports me. So they make sure I eat in case I forget. But one of my favorite places here in Winston-Salem is called Dario's, and that's where I went this morning, at about 11 before I logged up to here, to make sure I had a lunch. But yes, it's between whatever my team is getting or whoever's going out to the office, that remembers that I don't eat as often as I should, checks on me. Or if it's my decision, I typically go to Dario's, which is a local fast food restaurant, that is just simply amazing.
I'm so glad you said that because I was over here like kale and salads and oh man, that's not what I have for lunch. I feel like I'm always surprised that like, oh, it's lunchtime. And then I go downstairs. I have worked from home for the last 5 years and still haven't figured out how to not eat all day. But I typically go downstairs and grab whatever I please. Sometimes it's my toddler's chicken nuggets, and sometimes it's pizza from the day before. It's almost never kale or anything of nutritional value. And I also have my daughter. I had a pandemic baby. My little 1-year-old is downstairs with the nanny, and I like to just like spend my lunch loving on her and getting some cute baby snuggles. But that's typically what I'm going for. Like, what can I put in the microwave really, really fast so that I can get more baby snuggles? But not kale, never kale.
Well, thank you all so much. Like I said, Destiny, I'll drop your follow-up information, with the other bios that we have in case any students or staff want to reach out with more information. But thank you all so much for joining us for Let's Do Lunch. I hope you have a lovely week, and always feel free to come back and visit us at Mary Baldwin, or reach out if you'd like to connect with some students that are interested in teaching or the paths that you've chosen. So everybody have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.